Ballingstad, Sweden. Just outside this small town, located 40 miles northwest of Stockholm, is an ancient carved granite block. Known as the Buksta runestone, it is one of the few remaining relics that depict the mighty god Odin holding his magical spear. Gungnir.
The Buksta runestone is an extraordinary ancient relic that has runic inscriptions which were used by the Vikings. It shows Odin riding on a horseback with a spear.
So one of the things we find with the Norse gods is they each have remarkable possessions, and among those is a spear that Odin claims for himself called Gungnir. And Gungnir is a remarkable spear in that whatever you throw it at, it's going to hit.
According to Viking or Norse mythology, Odin's spear was made by the sons of Ivaldi, the very same creatures who built the ship Skidbladnir. They imbued the spear with special properties that not only made it incredibly accurate, but gave it immense power.
Gungnir was some kind of high-tech weapon. No matter who he threw it at, it would hit it. Like some laser-guided cruise missile or something like that. That just simply could not miss its mark once it had been set to its target.
And we know that when he uses this in war, it always reaches its target. This is not something which is simplistic. This is something which clearly is advanced weaponry. And to find that a deity has this at his disposal can be read in two things. One, it is all made up, or two, it is actually factual. And today we know that there are such weapons.
Precision weapons like laser-guided bombs, cruise missiles, and satellite-guided munitions are staples in the world's most sophisticated military arsenals. Is it possible that Odin possessed similar technology? Could Gungnir actually have been a guided missile created by otherworldly beings?
When the ancients are describing technology, it's clear that they couldn't have known exactly what this was. And it opens the question, is it possible that the weapon, Gungnir, was an actual advanced technology, maybe even possessed by the Vikings or their gods?
If Gungnir was in fact a precision-guided missile, similar to today's so-called smart bombs, then what might be the facts behind Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir?
Thor's hammer had interesting origins. It was made by dwarves under duress. So the handle wasn't quite as long as a hammer might be, but it was enormously powerful. It had great accuracy. He could throw it, and it would hit anything that he intended it to hit, and then it would come back to him almost in boomerang style.
But Thor's hammer, like the weapons of many of the Norse gods, would seem to be some high-tech, real weapon, perhaps one given to them by extraterrestrials.
And when he uses it, it is actually said that this weapon is able to crush mountains. Now imagine a weapon which is able to destroy an entire mountain. The hammer does not cause explosions. It is really the physical force which destroys the object. And that is something which today we describe as kinetic weapons.
Japan, 700 AD. Here, according to legend, the swordsmith Amakuni and his son Amakura sealed themselves away in their blacksmith shop in an effort to forge the perfect weapon. For 7 days and 7 nights, they prayed to the Shinto gods to guide them. 31 days later, they emerged from their isolation with a curved, single-edged sword resembling no blade ever made before.
At that time, the swords that they used were these double-edged, Chinese design, clunky, heavy, unwieldy swords. And Amakuni started reestablishing and learning everything that he knew about metallurgy, and after about a month, he finally emerged from his forge, and he had this single-edged blade with a curvature to it. Every swordsmith in the area ridiculed him. Everybody laughed at him. He thought it was ridiculous, didn't know what he was doing. That's not the way you do it. Well, the next time the emperor went off into battle, when he came back, Amakuni stood on his front porch and he started counting the blades. 2, 10, 15, 20, 100, 200 blades. None of them were broken. And the emperor praised him and said, "You are the greatest swordsmith ever." Ever since then, they have followed that design.
But what was the secret behind Amakuni's radical new design? And what, or who, inspired him to deviate from the one that had been used for more than 1,000 years? Was he simply ahead of his time? Or could he really have received otherworldly guidance during the 7 days and nights he and his son prayed to the Shinto gods?
The history of the Japanese sword is a long and varied history, all the way back to mythological beliefs that Omikami, the sun goddess, gave her grandson a sword when she sent them down to rule over the earth.
According to the beliefs of the samurai, higher beings called kami began human life. But in order for humans to experience the divine nature of the kami, they must undergo purification rituals, which were always performed when making a new blade.
Before you even begin, you bathe yourself and you put on clean clothes. All your assistants give prayers and they solicit the help from the gods. And in fact, there are swordsmiths that will actually chant as they're hammering on the blade, because every hammer, as it compacts the metal, is also including their chant into it.
Could the swordmaker Amakuni and his son Amakura have actually come in contact with the kami? And might these Buddhist gods have come not from a spiritual realm, but from an extraterrestrial one, as ancient astronaut theorists believe? Might alien beings have chosen Amakuni, the greatest swordmaker of his time, to hold the knowledge of this new technology?
When you give certain very powerful objects to people, you need to have extremely intelligent people to use them. And so what we find everywhere is that even if the gods had given the most extraordinary machine, including fire or any other piece of technology, you would have to have somebody able to operate it, a highly trained human being.
Another example of Amakuni's work, the Kogarasu Maru blade, the most legendary sword in Japanese history, resides in the Japanese Imperial Collection. But modern scholars and scientists have had difficulty in figuring out the secret to its amazing strength.
The famous stories are always, of course, the Japanese steel used for the samurai blades has been very hard to reproduce because some of these processes can be incredibly sensitive to the exact detail of the temperature. Some of its features are just its flexibility and the way they were able to fold it over and over, and its incredible strength and its resistance to oxidation, which is what you really need to keep something sharp.
Could the fact that modern sword makers have been unable to achieve the same quality as Amakuni's blades be further evidence that he was trained by a more advanced race of beings? And might these ancient swords have held some technology we have yet to discover? May 2010, off the coast of California. A powerful new weapon shoots down unmanned aerial drones during secret testing carried out by the U.S. Navy. Firing from a warship at a distance of nearly 2 miles, a ray of intense laser energy burns through targets traveling at speeds of more than 300 miles per hour. But is it possible that such so-called death rays could have been used before, perhaps in ancient times?
I'm quite convinced that there have been in the past advanced civilizations on Earth that did have such things as the so-called death ray. Whether it was used as a weapon or whether it was just observed being used is a very, very open question.
In 214 BC, Greeks living in the Sicilian city of Syracuse prepared for an attack by a fleet of Roman warships. Though outnumbered by a superior military force, ancient texts suggest that Syracuse was well defended by a mysterious and powerful new weapon.
Probably the most famous ancient death ray was the one that was built by the Greek inventor Archimedes. He was able to create this giant mirror and parabolic disc and focus the sun's rays on the fleet and set these ships on fire. So here we have what would be a primitive kind of death ray that really worked.
But how could Archimedes have conceived such a formidable weapon, one far in advance of any known at the time?
Researchers suggest the inventor may have drawn inspiration from Greek myths written nearly 600 years before the Battle of Syracuse. Myths that told the stories of gods that brandished cosmic weapons of incredible destructive force.
If you look in the Greek tradition, they have a very clear description of Zeus's thunderbolt, which he was able to point at people or at other things that he wanted to explode, hit the button, and what they described as lightning would come out and create a fierce and terrible explosion.
When these ancient gods, like Zeus, were to come down from the sky in this flurry of thunder and lightning and then get out of their spacecraft, they were perceived as gods. These ancient aliens had fantastic technology available to them, a technology that would have seemed like magic to our primitive ancestors. So when these people came down from the sky and they had advanced energy weapons, they were like gods to our ancient ancestors.
It doesn't matter where you go, but the gods were always able to create thunder, create lightning in a controlled way. In ancient India, we have the gods holding the dorjes sometimes like this. And it looks as if some type of a directed energy beam comes directly out of the front to vanquish the enemy, to destroy him, to incinerate him.
But if death ray type weapons had been used in ancient times, might there be some sort of tangible proof? Perhaps there is. Here, scattered throughout the Scottish countryside, can be found numerous ancient ruins. Many appear to have been forts or other enclosures, dating back thousands of years. Remarkably, they also appear to have been subjected to fire and heat, so intense it practically turned the stone structures into glass. It's a process more scientifically known as vitrification.
Here you have these stone buildings in which an analysis of the outside comes to the conclusion that they were heated to over 1,000 degrees Celsius in temperature. Conventional fire could not have reached this heat. You needed a sustained burn at 1,000 degrees Celsius for a long period of time. Why is it that it's only these forts that have this type of charring, where they're actually glazed like pottery on the outside? Why is it that you don't see it on the stones in the surrounding area? And even more interestingly, why is it that so many of them are concentrated into this one little area in northern Scotland? I believe this is very clear evidence of death rays being used.
An unmanned aerial vehicle hurtles across the sky. It travels at supersonic speeds, spitting fire, launching deadly missiles, programmed to seek and destroy. The effect is devastating. High-tech warfare at its most lethal. But what could be a page stolen from a U.S. military black project is actually a description written down over 2,500 years ago in the sacred Hindu text known as the Mahabharata.
When it comes to the ancient Indian accounts, they're really eyewitness testimony of the gods fighting.
When you read the ancient Hindu epics, they talk about horrific weapons, missiles, and atomic weapons, massive laser weapons that are melting and devastating entire cities.
I refuse to think that our ancestors came up with these stories out of thin air. When writing was first invented, they wrote down their history. The first things that were ever written down were actual events.
How is it that some of the earliest written accounts of warfare describe sophisticated weaponry that humans wouldn't develop for thousands of years? For the answer, ancient astronaut theorists point to numerous descriptions of deadly weapons found throughout the Mahabharata. Many strikingly similar to those used by the military today. One example are the incendiary weapons wielded by Vishnu, which are specially equipped to find their targets.
Vishnu has a flying guided missile to the Narayanastra, and once it is launched, it will destroy everything that is moving. So, according to the description, it is a motion detecting weapon, which is pretty much like our modern weaponry. There is also a weapon that is heat-seeking.
Heat-seeking is a very effective way of finding something. You would fire a missile from behind one aircraft at an aircraft in front of you, specifically targeted against the hot engine. And then you were able to move off from behind the airplane, and the heat seeker would still be able to find the target.
I am aware that there are forces of nature. You've got thunder, lightning, earthquakes, but how would you go from witnessing that to a description of heat-seeking missiles?
In addition to guided missiles, the Mahabharata is filled with accounts of other sophisticated weapons wielded by the gods.
In the Mahabharata, 46 different types of weapons are described, and each one has a specific function. So Pasupata is a weapon that actually multiplies into 7 different arrows. So then it hits 7 different targets at the same time. Salva is an anti-god. He can make his vehicle disappear. So we're talking about a flying object that is stealth. He also can put people into sleep. So we're perhaps talking about nerve gas.
They talk about weapons that are so high-tech that it's could only be from extraterrestrials.
But of all the weapons described in the Mahabharata, perhaps the most deadly was a device called the Brahmastra, a weapon that the text warned was never to be used.
Brahma Astra is described as the ultimate weapon, and once it is launched, it will simply burn everything, so it incinerates the entire universe. We're talking about a nuclear blast, 100-fold magnitude of the bomb that we have seen or experienced in our own times. Should never be used. And yet, someone was going to make use of that Brahma Astra. So that's the dilemma that the book talks about in the Mahabharata. India now has a rocket program, and one of their rockets is called Shakti. Shakti means goddess energy. This is also another divine weapon. Indians are now sort of going back to their text, or rather mythology, and reliving it by their modern technology.